So let me introduce our authors tonight. We have two authors, Rebecca Kauffman. Many of you may recognize. I thought it was her fourth time at Books and Brews, and she told me no, it's a third time. But she had her debut novel here, and she is now on her sixth novel. That's really impressive in the world of authorship and everything else. Her works have received the following distinctions: the New York Times Editor's Choice, Indie Next Pick, Center for Fiction's First Novel Prize Long List, Premio Trebuch de Libre. Did I say that right? I don't know. Award. I'm assuming that's international. Thank you. And more. Her novels have been published in 6 languages. That's pretty impressive as well. And she lives right here, 1 mile from us. Let's give her a welcome. Oh, and she's here tonight to talk about her 6th novel, The Reservation, which just was released in February. So this is on the forefront of when it came out. The Reservation. In fact, it was very hard to get the book in early from her publishers. And then we also are joined by Bryan. He is a seasoned art entrepreneur and storyteller with a passion for helping others succeed. He's a graduate of JMU. We won't say what year that was. And has spent decades in broadcasting as a sales manager and founded 2 companies and 3 nonprofits since 2009, one of which, 5 Points Creative, an award-winning marketing firm, has received 16 Telly Awards. He also hosts a weekly podcast, Naturally Curious. There's some stickers over there on that podcast. And in his free time, has brought, he's here tonight to talk about his 2nd book. It's an international bestseller, Turning Tables, Everything I Need to Know About Business I Learned as a Server. Let's give him a warm welcome. All right. Wow. We're in a place of food service. We're talking about food service. You know, it's one of those things that in reading in both of your books, you bring out elements that highlight the people who are behind the scenes, who we don't see, who bring us these amazing meals. And I wanted to start with you, Bruce, in talking about your book. You really look at and talk with so many people and researched about how important is it for people to go out to eat? I mean, what? Are we obsessed with that as an American culture?
One of the things is everybody goes out to eat. And it's embarrassing when you start to do the calculation. We were doing this with a young couple last night about how much people spend eating out at restaurants or having food brought in. And so much of it is ease, but a lot of it is also comfort. And nobody goes out to eat for a bad experience. People go out to eat for good experiences. And there's something about the camaraderie of eating food together or drinking beverages or adult beverages. We are at a brewery together that really elevates an experience. And if you think about a lot of those experiences are memories that we carry with us forward. And so what's really interesting is the people that are working behind the scenes are oftentimes what elevate that experience for us, or sometimes what detract from that experience, right?
Right. So just to get an idea in the audience, how many of you all have worked in food service? Let's get your hand up. Wow. Okay. I'm excited because our chef from the Stone Soup Books and Cafe is sitting right there, Chef Laura Boncash. So give her a hand. Yeah. Excited because I learned everything in that. But how many of y'all were front of the house, which is sort of the servers, the hosts? How about the back of the house? Dishwashers, cooks. All right. Can you kind of share with us what is the front of the house and the back of the house? Either one of you.
Well, so just like Mary Katharine shared, the front of the house are customer-facing employees, and about 3/4 or half of you already know this, so I'm telling you something you already know, but humor me as we talk to some of the folks that don't have that same experience. The other half is the back of the house, and that would be the kitchen crew, like Mary Katharine said, the dishwashers, the prep team. In a lot of restaurants, they have expediters, and those are the people that are in between the kitchen and the service team, and they're making sure their garnishes and making sure their salad and getting things organized. And ideally, these sides work well together, and that's the way it's designed. That's ideally. One of the things that I've learned through the last 40 years of business is it's the same in industry. You have a production team and you have a sales team, or you have a medical care team and a billing team. And what you'll notice throughout whatever interactions you observe is one person can ruin that experience, that exchange, or conversely, you can also change the trajectory of somebody's day by a good exchange or experience. So there's a really clear connection between food service and the work that's done front of house and back of house and just commerce.
Okay, Rebecca, let's talk about the reservation and how I know that fans of yours who are here tonight will not be disappointed if they haven't picked up a copy of what you do in this book. But what is happening? Give us the setting. What is Aunt Orsa's restaurant, and what's happening there?
Thank you. So Aunt Orsa's restaurant is the finest of dining available in the small fictionalized Midwestern town where this is set. And the novel takes place over the course of one day in which 22 expensive steaks have turned up missing first thing in the morning. And it also happens to be the same day that a celebrity author has made a reservation to dine. So tensions and emotions are running very high, and this quickly turns into a tornado of gossip and accusations, and then a full-scale investigation by the owner, who goes by Aunt Orsa. She wants everyone on staff to think of her as their favorite crazy aunt. So that's sort of the world that we're in.
And we all felt that way about the owners of restaurants that we worked at, right? They were our favorite aunt. Yes.
Maybe the crazy part.
And I think, pulling from your own experience, I love the interview you had with Chris. You worked a long time in food service. So on top of what Bruce has experienced, you also experienced this. Were there any ever instances of celebrity dinners or anticipated or actually not looked for events that you had in waiting tables?
Oh my. Yeah. So I have a lot of restaurant experience. I've worked in restaurants on and off from the time I was a teenager into my 30s. Every city and town I've lived in, from small family restaurants in rural Ohio to French fine dining on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, which I did as a college student. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. The only seafood I'd eaten up to that point was fish sticks. I was I'd never opened a bottle of wine that wasn't a screw top. So truly baptism by fire. But I must say the most exciting celebrity sighting that I ever had, there were a few in New York, but Mr. John Grisham himself actually came to the restaurant, one of the restaurants that I worked at here in Harrisonburg, Absolutely nothing of note happened, except, as I mentioned, everyone who interacted with him said he was just like so gracious and so lovely. But that's what popped into my mind when I thought I needed to try and up the ante a little bit, raise the tension going into this shift, bring in someone of some import.
You did just that. I mean, the idea that the reservation, and I'm not, spoiling anything here because trust me, Rebecca's book is so full, but that John Grisham is the reservation. Have you heard from him yet I still think he needs a blurb here.
No word, and not holding my breath.
At least a blurb. You write, Bruce, about this type of experience and how that is something you're seeking in business. Why do you think that it's an asset? Or why do you think employers should think it's an asset to see food service experience on someone's resume?
It's a great question. Lou Kadiri is Senator Warner's head of Virginia operations, and she says when she has an opening, if she sees somebody has food service experience, she'll kind of go out of her way to, and I probably just flooded her inbox now. Sorry, Lou. But she'll go out of her way to see if she can interview that person or speak with them. And what I've experienced is people that have been in food service have learned to think on their feet, have learned to figure things out for themselves, have learned to prioritize, and I guess more importantly, reprioritize. There's a story in the book. Katie Martin is a person I interviewed probably during the process, and she realized in the middle of the interview that she had been a NICU nurse for 12 years, and she had been in food service at the time for 12 years. And it was almost for her an epiphany that she realized that she had done both of these things and for the same amount of time, and how often what she learned in food service applied to what she was doing in the NICU unit at Carillion in Roanoke. And I saw that repeatedly because people have to be able to think on the fly. And I guess the last thing as it relates to that is this concept of empathy. Often I'll talk about the fact that we could all use a little more empathy in the world these days. We all know what's going on in our world, but we don't know what's going on in other people's worlds. And so one of the things that I've seen is servers intrinsically have to be empathetic because you are going into somebody else's space. And you might do it 20 times in a night or 120 times a night. And we've all been at a table where the server has been intrusive and it throws off the comfort level and the pace of the meal. But if you can go in empathetically and kind of pick up the vibe, you can really provide a much better experience for people. And empathy serves people well in almost any industry. So that's what I've seen is across the board. I hired a lot of salespeople and admin folks at TV stations, also in Ohio and Michigan. I don't know what part of Ohio, but I probably have been there at one point. And if they had food service experience, I wanted to talk to them for those kinds of reasons.
It's one of those things you don't think about as a resume packer, but it's interesting to know that it is.
I think that's the other thing is if you are mid-career or you are trying to figure out what's next, if I were you, I would lean into the food service side of things because most hiring employees, the ones that get it, understand it. And you really don't have to go out of your way to explain it to them. They just, like Rebecca or I, would just intrinsically understand that you've been through some things and have seen some things. And a lot of times we'll downplay those experiences, but those soft skills are actually very, very important in most kinds of positions.
I'm with you. I was a scooper for Friendly's ice cream on the early days. And the stickiness of that was super fun. So, characters, empathy. Again, this is a Rebecca Kauffman novel that does not dissatisfy. It's so amazing in the characters. And I just want to go to that. You have from Ant the busser to this astute bartender Darius to Glenn the lifer lead line cook. Your characters have that flavor, the wit, the grit to deal with, I'm going to use a pun, the meat of the story rides with them, even though that they're missing the 22 fillet steaks, you know. That's right. Did you have a particular character that you want to share with us tonight that kind of stuck to you, that was like the hero? There were so many to me as the reader, but one that you just couldn't let go of.
I mean, I would say, yeah, I have the biggest soft spot probably for Glenn, who is derided by some of his coworkers as being a lifer, but he takes so much pride in his work. But I don't know. I develop a soft spot for every character that I write. That's just part of it. Is the deeper I go, the more I find to love. So there are a lot of characters in this book. You switch perspective every single chapter. There are 15 or 16, and I've just found that proximity to character is really what drives the voice that sort of comes up and out for each one. So in creating them, I'm not thinking about how do I learn to love this person. I'm thinking about like, how close can I get? What do they find intolerable? What do they find delightful? What do they find unspeakable? And I have to have no fear of getting close enough to embarrass the character and even myself as their writer in the process. But yeah, it's really that proximity to the character that gives rise to the love.
You structure your novel, it literally has this wonderful opening table of contents. It's called menu. And on the menu are how many? 15? Sorry, we can't find the page. We're well planned here.
They're not numbered, but I think they're
15 or 16, from the operations assistant to the owner, the party, the pastry chef, down to the dishwasher. So you really shine lights into places. Was that why the structure? Why lay it out? It's one night, one reservation, one experience, but yet all these different people.
Yeah, so an overarching framework or structure is usually what I like to create before I start writing. And I will take a long time thinking about that. Typically it's over the course of several months. I'll have something sort of in the back of my mind, developing slowly. And then I'll settle on it and then kind of dive in. But in this case, I decided that I wanted it to be take place over the course of one day, the missing stakes, and to alternate perspective within staff members. And there's something about having limitations to the structure that sets my mind free, counterintuitive, but like rather than starting a novel as a blank page, it feels like a blank canvas when it has defined edges, when I have a sense of where things have to end. Somehow that helps me. It's like a window into the unknown if I have these little like placeholders that I have in mind. So, and my previous novel, the concept was I wanted to write a book that took place over the course of 1 year, told in monthly stories, anchored by the anticipation and arrival of a child. So January opens with news of the pregnancy and so forth. So that's just to use another example of roughly how much information I like to have when I'm starting a book.
And it's magical, actually, that all of these people play into this and have their own story within a one-day time period. It's quite Elizabeth Strout. It's connected. It's beautiful. Speaking of characters, you encounter characters in your first serving job. And I love this description you have in your book of Dolly, this person that you learned a lot. You were a brand new server. She had those hard black toed shoes. She had the apron and the hairnet. What did you learn from these kinds of people who had been doing this a while before you walked on the scene?
Yeah, Rebecca talked about the lifers, and Dolly was one of those lifers. So when I finished my lunch shift, she went and had her smoke break, took a breather, and then she went back that evening for the dinner shift. And I learned, don't cross Dolly. It was frightening because you make that mistake once. You go into her section once, you talk to one of her regulars once, and I bet there are a few people that have been in food service and know exactly what I'm talking about. So you think about the Music Man, and you got to know the territory, and you learn the territory. And with Dolly, there were very clear markers. And what's interesting is throughout my professional career, post college when I was a server, I saw a lot of Dollies, and they look different and they act differently, but the process is the same. You have to figure out, how are you empathetic and meet people where they are? How do you help Dolly to feel comfortable? I'm not saying that Dolly and I were out having cigarette breaks together by the end of the summer, but she at least tolerated me. They had never had a college kid as a server, from what I could tell at Hearn's restaurant in Wilmington, Delaware. They had had a lot of Dollies, and they didn't trust me. They didn't know what to make of me. But I think they realized later on in the summer that I didn't mean any harm. And as long as I didn't take too many of their tables, and as long as I let them have their regulars, we were able to navigate it for the most part. But that taught me throughout my career about dealing with the people that, again, you know what you're going through, but you don't know what they're going through. And I don't really didn't know much about Dolly, still don't know much about Dolly, but I'm not going to forget her. And those black shoes and the apron and everything you just described was exactly the thing about, I typed in, when I was trying to think about the description, tried to find that uniform, and Dolly shows up. Maybe not exactly, but you know what I mean? The concept of Dolly shows up because most any lifer restaurant has a Glenn or has a Dolly, and that's just the way it is. There's one here.
Raise your hand. No, I had a bartender when I was, and it was same thing. If you did not want your tables to go well that evening, you did not cross her path that way. Right. So looking at this story as it unfolds, Rebecca, and again, not giving anything away, but it's kind of a tumultuous evening. Not only are they looking for these missing steaks, but the dishwasher went out, and the dishwasher walked that night. There's a disgruntled pastry chef who wanted to be a server, but was not promoted because she wasn't the right stuff. So you've got a lot of weaving to do here. My question around that is just, how did they possibly get the meal to the diners effortlessly? Or did they not? And you do have a diner chapter. So, did they feel that ripple effect of all those problems that they were encountering?
Gosh, I mean, I have worked enough shifts that have felt this catastrophically unhinged. There's no doubt in my mind, like their ability to execute, take things to the table. Things get so hairy in a rush, and you just make it happen, and you count on your teammates, and you just make it happen because there's no other way except to walk out, which occasionally, it happens. But it's a high intensity scenario, and you really must rise to meet it. It's been a number of years now since I've worked in a restaurant, but it's still, thinking back on restaurant work, it gives rise to feelings of deep warmth, familiarity, the feeling of community. All of that returns along with like the rising stress. I just feel it inside of me when I have more stress dreams to this day about restaurant work than any other,
I was just going to ask the two of you who are both in food service. One of the themes that came up when I was interviewing people, and it was grueling work going to all those restaurants and bars, but I did that for my readers, But almost every one of them was telling me about dreams, reoccurring dreams they had. It sounds like you haven't. Did you have them? Okay, so that's a thing, right?
Yeah, it's like deep. It's a really particular type of stress, and my dreams are always totally like I just was seated 13 tables, and I don't know how, but I'm supposed to greet them all simultaneously, and I don't know how, but in the dream I actually do. But then I'm supposed to like carry some food, and I realize my bowl of soup is a bowl of sand, but I like, in the dream, it's like these things are like alarming, but I make my way through them, and like that's in a way that's how the rush can feel some nights is you got to make it happen.
I think the front of the house and the back of house dreams and nightmares are a little different, don't you? Did you hear some different nightmares or situations in your research?
I primarily talked to front of the house people, but one of them that kept coming up was they went to get ice out of the well, which all of your ice are in an ice container in the bar or in the kitchen, and there was broken glass in it. And that's every server's nightmare. Never scoop with a glass to put ice in a glass. Always scoop with a scoop or a plastic something. Because it's not good. And so there were a couple people that dreamt that. And then hot tea, Lou, who I mentioned earlier, I did a whole chapter called Hot Tea Dreams Lou is hysterical. She worked in Stanton for a while and then in Richmond, and she's a great storyteller, and she's British originally. And she said, everyone knows it's ridiculous to have tea in a water bottle and take tea bags and share the bags and let them pick. Everyone knows that you must seep the tea in the bag in the water, and that's the only way to serve it. So this is ridiculous. And how do you get the tea across the room on a tray without spilling water everywhere? So I called it Hot Tea Dreams, and it was everybody's dreams, like the glass in the well, or I've never heard the bowl full of sand. That's a good one.
Yeah, I had to make coffee drinks for people in an Italian restaurant, and I will never do that again. Let us go to the audience for questions about the book, about food service, about tipping, about all of those things that we haven't covered tonight. We're here for your questions, and you've got two authors here. What are your thoughts about The Bear?
I know you wrote a chapter about it. I loved it. I love the show. Yeah. I will let you take. He wrote a chapter about a specific episode.
You might have more thoughts, but I would say thanks for asking about The Bear, the TV show The Bear. I actually did a talk in Ohio in 2015 called Everything I Needed to Know About Business I Learned as a Waiter. And it sat in my brain for about 8 years. And then The Bear swept all those awards in 2023. And I said to my wife, I need to write this book. And so I started interviewing people and pulling things together. And I love the show too. I will say I love season 1. There's 4 seasons, right? 3.
I think there are 4.
Season 1 was amazing, and the last season was amazing. Season 2 to me wandered a little bit. There was some good acclaim. It seems like a lot of television shows are based in law practices or medical situations or crime. There aren't many in food. There are, Alice and Mel's Diner, and those go way back. Cheers. There are some, I'm not saying that. But I'd never really seen a show that captured the way it felt to work in a kitchen. And the pace, and it reminded me of the Bourne movies, the Jason Bourne movies, where I don't know if it was, there was one episode that was all one camera. I remember reading that, but a lot of them very frenetic. The characters are great, but you're rooting for them, right? And it's a little bit like the shift that you were asking about, where how does it happen? And yet magically it does happen. And so I really enjoyed it. Not every episode, but there is one episode. I think it's called Forks, or Every Second Counts. And you really start to see how one of the main characters changes their whole perspective in a week. So like Rebecca's book is in a day, this episode is in a week. And it changes. You start to have some empathy for this very rough and challenging character. So I really enjoyed it. And I thought it captured the food business in a raw way. And it was very visually appealing, except for the Christmas episode with Jamie Lee Curtis. That was not visually appealing. She was amazing, but that episode was, woo.
That episode was hard to watch. That was like up there with my favorites, though, because it was powerful. And I thought that it did, it just gave so much insight into why this man is behaving the way that he behaves. And I just admired the handling of that. It was a difficult watch. But yeah, backstory can be really difficult to execute on screen. It's much easier on the page to zip back and forth in time. But I thought that episode gave such, beautiful and painful insight into, the various familial, psychological circumstances that have like created this man that you've been watching for several seasons at that point. Yeah.
For all the amount of money and time we spent, eating out, how much do we know about, the back end of food service? I mean, I think that's why we're kind of gathered tonight, but really, is that sort of what your books address?
For me, I can say that I run into two types of people. One person has food service experience and says everybody should do food service, and the other is a little bit unaware of what's happening. And I think the magic of eating at a place like this, or having drinks at a place like this, or whenever we go out, is that suspension of disbelief. We don't have to really worry about what's happening in the kitchen. We know what happens in our own kitchen, or we know if we think about it or we watch The Bear, we know what's happening. But we're able to sit there and not worry about how it gets from the farm to the table. It's just there magically. And that's the mark of a really good experience. And I think a lot of it's maybe similar to a referee or an umpire, an official in a sporting event. The best ones do what they do and you never notice they're there. And I think that's a real different experience for people, because it is easy to forget that they're there. But I mentioned to somebody earlier that we are the best customers if we've been in food service, and we can be the worst customers because we do have high standards because we know what's happening and what they're supposed to do. So when that doesn't happen, it can sometimes create a little bit of frustration or anxiety or whatever it might be, even empathy, feeling badly for the person that dropped the tray or whatever they did.
Yeah, and just thinking on my what I hoped to accomplish in terms of revealing people who might not be seen or noticed. That's very much on my mind as I'm writing. I write about people who are aggressively ordinary on the surface, in part because I think that the magic and mystery of life, what is literally extraordinary about life, is most beautifully expressed in lives that appear ordinary. So I'm always interested in what is the mystery of the person, and I know I mentioned to Chris the other day when we spoke, when I'm creating characters, I'm doing two very contradictory things at the same time. I'm trying to understand and help the reader understand why they are behaving the way they're behaving, while at the same time honoring the belief I hold, which is that fundamentally every person is a mystery. There's no ironclad explanation for why we act the way we act. There's no one size fits all. There's no single way to understand, describe, express. So I'm trying to do both. I'm trying to notice and celebrate the mysterious while giving some sort of shape and guidance that makes some narrative sense.
I just think that you're going to be the next Oprah call is all I have to say. You were here last month when we were talking to Bruce Holsinger, and this illumination of people that you bring in your work, it really does important. It tells so much about everyone and all the people around us. And there are characters in this book that seem familiar because there's a who's a prep cook who has a second job, and he's from Guatemala, and he is also working at a poultry plant. So you pull from where you're at. I mean, and yet there's no place we could recognize in this book, really. It's just that the people you can recognize. Yeah, it's beautiful. What other questions do we have tonight? Talking about those lifers, those people who have been working for decades in places like Joe's Steakhouse or Crab House. Yes. And those places, can you talk a little bit about those folks?
So lifers exist in all kinds of places, right? All kinds of food service places. But the high-end ones you're talking about, obviously those can be pretty lucrative places to eat and places to work. I think that when I'm talking to people about this topic, one of the things that bubbles up is a lot of people think that they have to use what they're learning like I did maybe, or like Rebecca did, to launch other careers. But this is all helpful information if this is the career you stick with forever. Many people love, and I wrote about this, many people love their work because they know what they're going to make. They can leave at the end of the shift. They can do what they want to do. And they like that the better job they do, the more money they make. So what was interesting to me is some of the not high or not as pricey restaurants, people can make a good living because they're turning the tables quickly, and other ones have a slower turn, but a more lucrative check that they draw tips from. So lifers exist all around us. And one of the things to tie back to what you were saying about the characters, I really love what you were talking about with getting to know your characters and the interesting angles that they present. I don't think we necessarily as customers go out of our way like we could to care for the servers. And that's a twist. They're here to serve you. But just like anything else, the more you give, the more you get. So if you're at a table and you can give somebody grace, if you're at a table and they're serving you and you can give them an extra tip or whatever it is you can give to somebody can make a big difference. And it doesn't really matter whether that person's going to be a server their whole life or they're a server for a season. They're crossing paths with you. And I can't tell you how many times we've crossed paths with a server over the last number of years, and they've become a friend or somebody we've gotten to know. And it's really, it can be a meaningful relationship because like you said, each of these people are people and they have things to share and important value they bring to your day. And I think that's kind of meaningful. So we think about how people care for us, but next time you go out, just try a little bit to care for them.
That's on you, folks.
You have a responsibility.
On us too. Yes. How about you on the lifer question, Rebecca?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a lot to add. That was so well put. Yeah, there are folks who take a tremendous amount of pride in the work. And, you know, a lot of this depends on the culture of the restaurant. You know, the values that are modeled by core team members, management, ownership, etc. And yeah, whether you're bringing something to the table as a server with pride and feeling pleased about what you're representing and what you're delivering. And I have also worked at places where I completely want to dissociate from what I'm offering. And I've worked front of house and back of house as well. But yeah, every restaurant is different, and yeah, I don't know that I have anything to add.
As a diner, you can tell when you walk in, you understand that vibe. And that is oftentimes accidental, but most of the time it's intentional. Most of the time it's curated.
Can you count on the fact that the tip is getting to the server when you put it on a credit card, or should you pay them with cash?
99% of the time you can count on it. Cash might be easier for people. So if you carry cash, which very few people do, that might be more appropriate, or not appropriate, might be more beneficial, but there are systems to make sure that the servers are getting that gratuity. Absolutely. So you can be comfortable knowing they're getting it. You owned a restaurant, so you know. Yeah, they do.
It's a declarable piece when it's on the credit card. 80% of the people, a study that you recently, that eat out have been confused by how to tip, whether to tip a certain way or not, and how much to tip on. Is he going to be a jerk and not tip enough and feel bad? Or all of those mechanisms by which we're given the ability to do the math. You speak a little bit about math, Bruce, in your book, but all of those mechanisms, it makes us feel kind of bad if we don't do the right amount or if we're doing the wrong amount.
I mean, I am like the worst possible source on these questions. So I haven't worked in a restaurant in a number of years. Furthermore, I have 3-year-old and 5-year-old boys who are wild. So I've barely set foot in a restaurant as a guest either. So I'm going to toss that one.
I
Really well, Rebecca, because you've got the little ones, right?
I do think that some of that confusion is related to counter service, which I do address in the book. I think when you're sitting at a table, you know how to tip. I don't think there's any real confusion about that. And I think a good rule of thumb is round up. One of the things that I discovered during COVID was that $1, that $3, that $5 means a lot more to that person than it does to me. And so round up. But at the counter, I really struggle because I feel some of that same, and I don't want to pose as an expert on what people should tip or whatever, but sometimes I do leave a tip and sometimes I'm like, wait a minute. You rang this up and you didn't make my sandwich. Why am I leaving you a tip? And I feel the same guilt that the surveyors feel like, all right, I'll leave a little tip. Or if I've had a bad day, maybe I don't leave as big a one, right? So I think there is some confusion about that. I think there's a big difference between that counter service and fast casual versus a server or a bartender that you're interacting with. I think whomever did the survey probably differentiated that, but I don't know firsthand, didn't see the survey.
Let's ask the bartenders in the back and the servers tonight. Yes. The important thing is go above and beyond tonight. Okay. In other countries, it's different. They're not having to tip, or it's more relaxed. And I think, what is that background here in this country?
So tipping started about 100 years ago, maybe 150, but then became more regular about 100 years ago. Then in the 60s, it became more prevalent. And tipping in Europe is not as big a deal, but their servers are paid differently. Some of you might go to some fine dining establishments where they pool their tips. That happens more and more. There's group service where whomever sees the food takes the food. I worked primarily decades ago in a single service situation where the table was mine and I took the food and cleared it and did all those things. But you're right. In Europe, they don't tip the same way. And not that I'm going to Europe all that often, okay? I'm not a, 6-time novelist, so I don't go that often. But I don't own a bookstore. So, but when I've gone, it's so funny because just like this gentleman was saying, I'm a little conflicted because I feel like I should still tip, but then they're like, no, you don't need to tip. But I have the voice telling me I'm supposed to. So I think it's natural for we gringos to feel a little bit odd when we're traveling and aren't sure what to do.
I think just share with us a little bit, Rebecca, there's so much that I think is in your book, and beyond it being just really fun. I mean, fun to read, fast paced as always. What do you want the reader to get out of the book? I know that's a terrible question to ask an author, but what are you hoping that your reader will take away from it?
I don't know. I have the experience as a reader that a book can strike me really, really differently from one reading to the next. Something that I loved deeply 10 years ago, I'll read and it'll feel really flat to me. So it's hard to say. Of course, I hope readers enjoy this book. I hope they get some laughs out of it. I was asked recently, is this a comedy? Would you characterize this as a comedy? And I don't think at all about categories while I'm writing. When I came up with a concept, The Missing Stakes, and The Visiting Author, it struck me right away as very ripe for comedy. It struck me as very funny, and I set out to write a very funny book. And I hope there is some humor in there, but sort of the opposite of the experiences I've had in the past, where I have entered into a book with like a sort of heavier, like emotional touchstone sort of framework, and then I have found humor as I've gotten to know characters and gotten to know their idiosyncrasies and so forth. In the case of this book, I set out trying to make it very funny, and then with each character that I discovered, I found grit and gravity that made it a little bit more of an emotional book for me than I was expecting to write. And I think that's mostly due to the working class folks that I was writing. They, with a few exceptions, they don't have health insurance. They struggle to get secure transportation to and from work. They're really paycheck to paycheck and just getting by. So that kind of made it impossible for me to find a butt of the joke that I was perhaps hoping to. But yeah, I hope readers laugh a little bit over the course of these pages, and I hope that it means something to someone at some time.
That's done. I think so. Absolutely. It's a wonderful thing. And Bruce, I think that that you have a consulting firm, creative marketing, and it's so wonderful to say, buy the book. It's a little bit easier, is learn about it this way. But what are you hoping for your readers to take away when they pick up a copy of Turning Tables?
You said that wasn't a good question. It's actually a really good question because I'm not sure I've been asked that, and I don't know that I have a prepared answer. But as I think back through, I did have people in mind as I was writing, and I was thinking about that person who's a server who maybe doesn't have the esteem that they could have. And it's okay if they stay as a server the rest of their career, or if they decide to use that experience to do something else. Either is possible and both are okay. And that's a big audience for that. So I have a lot of people that said, my son's a server, my daughter's a server, and I think they're going to love it. So I thought about that young careerist, that mid-careerist. And then I think I also thought a lot about hiring managers, getting them to kind of open their eyes a little bit, because there is a real challenge right now finding good talent in the workplace. It's hard to hire and attract talented employees. Anybody that hires somebody knows that's true. If you open your mind beyond that person that only has experience selling tractors or only has experience in financial as a teller at a bank, and start to see that a lot of these skills are transferable, I wanted to kind of open that up a little bit. So that is the idea that I had when I wrote this book, really was to help people see that there's value in some of these invisible folks. And I love that there was a book that you already knew about and that I just bought tonight, that is going to let people compare, because it'll be fun to see how they fit together, right?
I do. I appreciate you both being here tonight and kind of opening this up and looking at it through both nonfiction, why it applies to business and the things we do, but also through story, which I think is an incredible tool by which we see people who we haven't seen before. So thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you for being a part of this. Let's give them a show of hands.